Hi, Mako.
Hey Julia, great to see you.
Good to see you too, as always.
As always.
Um, Something that really stood out in the most recent newsletter was the quote that headed it, by Paul Pastor.
Yes,
Um, if we were half as eager to publicly and passionately praise what is true and good in the world as we are to condemn what is false and evil, society would quietly transform, and so would we.
yes.
I mean, that's a whole sermon in and of itself, right?
Amen. Amen. It's such a good statement by a poet, fellow cultural care sojourner in Pacific Northwest. And yeah, we just had to start with that beautiful line in a current monthly newsletter. So if anybody's interested listening, please go to iamculturecare.com and you can subscribe.
Yeah. And as I thought about that, I thought about, well, what are the things we want to highlight as commendatory? You had this exquisite, in a way, parody of the
Yes,
screw tape letters, right?
yes, yes.
In
This
regards
specific.
to Olympic fiascos.
Yes.
Um, and it was brilliant and it was heartbreaking, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because the screw tape letters are heartbreaking
Yes,
in
yeah.
that it illustrates how easy it is for humans to be distracted by
Hmm.
what matters,
Hmm.
but from what matters, not by what,
Hmm.
from what matters.
Yeah.
Um, and so the question, in a sense, is what have you seen recently that is praiseworthy,
Mm.
that stands out as exemplary? One thing also from the Olympics that I saw was the way that Emma Hayes, the US women's national team
Yes.
coach, praised her players
Yes.
publicly in press conferences.
Yeah.
I mean, it was extraordinary.
Yeah.
A coach can say, yeah, they played well, but she was specific in her
Yes.
praise.
Yes. You could tell she was observing, taking notes. She's a new coach hired by U.S. women's soccer team, and she is British, but got a chance in US. So, she took this on as kind of her gratitude to US soccer for seeing her potential as a manager. And yeah, that was amazing to see, Lindsay Horan, who's one of our best players, but I don't think she played that well in the tournament. She usually has much more accurate passes and it can score from any distance. But the way she talked about her was almost like her fellow coach, on the field. That she sees so many things that people don't see, especially a player. Even though Lindsay is a captain of the team. Yeah, that was pretty amazing to see. And we really have in sports events we see the results, we see the medals, we see the performance, but we don't see behind the scenes what happens. And oftentimes, these amazing things are happening behind the scenes, and in this particular case, quite extraordinary, beautiful, good things are happening.
Mm, yeah. And I wonder what else you've seen or noticed or heard or read recently
Yeah.
that's been just in that transit transitory space where it's
Yeah.
transcendent, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I've been posting a lot of sunset and sunrise photos, aurora photos. All of a sudden, the sky is lighting up again, especially in the East Coast, and of course in Norway and Canada. But because of social media, we have this capacity to take a photo and send it instantaneously across the world. And I thought, well, we complain about the algorithm of social media being so much about creating animosity and polarization and culture wars. But we forget that we have the agency to change it. Like, we are the ones consuming it. So if we focus on beauty and good things that are posted, stories that inspire us, or even reminders of stories like C.S. Lewis, or Tolkien, or any of these um, stories and essays that elevates us, we can post those too, right? So I've been very intentional. I have a hashtag sunrise is sunset, because sunrise here is a sunset somewhere else. 24/7 there's a sunset and sunrise somewhere. So there's beauty everywhere. And so we can, like, literally, we can constantly, somebody somewhere can be taking a photo of sunset or sunrise and post it. And anything we see in the world, whether it be flowers, clouds, birds, you name it. I mean, these are all things that are all about us. If you live in the city, a friend in Spokane, a photographer, has been taking intentionally photos of homeless people, and they're beautiful. And people that he knows, that he's spent time with. These are ordinary folks going about their days, but in Spokane, which is kind of a difficult city, dilapidated, post-industrial, but there's beauty everywhere, when you take a camera and you look for them. And so I've been intentionally posting those to at least change my algorithm, right? And then all of a sudden, there's a lot of feed on these beautiful images that people have been sending.
Yeah, something that I've been thinking about a lot is we talk about the algorithm as this external force
Right.
that we don't have control over.
Right.
Like it's something that's happening to us.
Yes.
And that I want to fundamentally shift that
Yes.
conversation
Mm-hmm.
because we're the ones that are constructing it.
Yes. That's right.
We are feeding it
Yes.
and can alter it.
Yes. And the algorithm, it will amplify what we do.
Yes. And so that is something that I'm just like, we have power to change this.
Yeah.
This is not just a force being acted upon us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every action we take
Yes. Yes.
is a ripple effect of change within an
Right.
ecosystem.
It's an ecosystem. And so you have been doing this for a while. You've been posting your literally art of making, and the video itself is a beautiful way to behold. Just to spend just a few minutes slowing down and watching the pigment spread, and the ink, creating these patterns. And the more people do that, and the more we share, and more we collaborate and amplify that, the AI is going to, because AI is set up to please us, right? So if we respond in culture wars way, the machine doesn't know that that's a negative, psychologically, and it can create such schisms in conversations. So it's just going to keep perpetuating that. But if we do it the other way, if we have generative creativity, creating beauty or moment of stillness, humor, I love retweeting Mr. Rogers quotes because they're just such humanity to them, and it doesn't matter who you are. You're just kind of like, huh, that's true, and this innocence that we still have, of valuing childhood experiences, valuing each other, creating a community of care, and that's something that actually I can see in the future how AI advancements can help us, right, and harness that energy toward each other, and curiosity, of understanding every single person has something to say that is beautiful or that is profound. And we have the technology to do it, but because my mindset is so much about consuming, what triggers us, right? So we use it unintentionally, and of course the companies who know how to do this will aggravate that. So there is pushing back against that and intentionality behind it.
Yeah. I mean, I think Mr. Rogers is the greatest American theologian of the 20th century.
I
So
agree. I agree.
like that's a whole other
Yeah,
thing.
talk about public theology
Yeah.
101. He was doing it without anybody noticing that he
Yeah.
was doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and it's so interesting. Last week I found out that the search algorithms identify my paintings as animals, not as
Because of the
paintings.
patterns. That's
Um,
hilarious.
I was searching in my camera roll. I needed to find a photo of um an animal
Yeah.
to send to somebody, and all my paintings came up. And every time I search for paintings in my camera
Yeah.
roll, my paintings never come up. And I'm frustrated in those moments, but I was thankful to finally find out
Yeah.
what
What it's reading.
what it's reading it as.
Yeah.
And I was so thankful that it was something in the natural world,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
That's
know?
great. That's beautiful.
Um,
I love
but
that.
it was just so fascinating, especially after reading The Worlds We Create by Fifi Lee last week.
Mm,
She's
mm,
part of the AI revolution and how
mm.
algorithms learn to read images. So it
Yeah.
was an interesting thing to have just read about the foundations of that and then to see,
Yeah.
oh, they're
Yeah.
really getting it wrong with
Right.
these, but
Right.
it's also correct.
Right. And
Um,
that's a good attitude to have about it, right? Because, the way we categorize things, it's actually not the way that even the most advanced algorithm can handle. And that's one thing to notice about
yeah,
what we take for granted in our sensory perceptions, whether it be hearing or seeing. The machines are not even close to the level that we have as a 3-year-old processing the world. Now, what they are good at is pattern matching. So they are extraordinarily fast at efficiently gathering data, visual data, let's say, and once they categorize something, you can find anything through that category, but it's not often, there's this gap, right? And the other side is because of the advanced speed and pattern matching of data, we now have situations where the machines are actually not only hallucinating but creating something that is beautiful. But we don't, because our mind is so stuck, we don't see it as something beneficial. So what you just said of the machines reading something of nature, right? So there's a thread there that's worth exploring as an artist. So why would we expect my painting to be read as this and this? And maybe that's a good test of what we do as artists. If we have algorithm process it, what does it see? And if it misses what it is, and we can universally see it as as a painting, then there's a huge gap between what the machine algorithm can detect and what we are creating. So that means what we're creating, art, is fundamentally so alien to the AI mechanism that it will not be able to reproduce, or it will not be able to even come close to, what we are going after. So now, with your piece being labeled as animals, and then there's all sorts of possibilities that we can play with, that we never thought about. Like I would never said your paintings are animals, but now we have an example of that category that was pre-existing that we didn't know about. So that's something fun to play with.
Yeah. And now I'm like, now I need to spend some time searching. What else does it identify them as?
Right, right,
Like, does it identify them as water? Does it
right,
identify them as
right,
bacteria? Does it
right.
like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
else?
Wow.
What else could it possibly identify them as? Because it doesn't identify them as painting.
Right, right. And because of the limitation in the descriptors that, so the words that are attached to certain patterns,
Mhm.
right? And that's only going to get better and better in terms of accuracy. But it's almost like these old cameras, as that produces ghost images, and there's certain way that light can be captured only if it's imperfect, right? So same thing here. Right? I mean, at any moment there's a generative opportunity that accidentally we are finding, and it's quite fascinating.
And something that I've been thinking concurrent with all of that
Yeah.
is what is the moral obligation of storytellers, of
Hmm.
image
Hmm.
makers?
Hmm. Hmm.
We have this clashing culture,
Hmm.
and everybody is spinning a story.
Yes. Right.
And is anybody considering the moral obligation of
Yeah.
their storytelling?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So absolutely right that um, any kind of communication is biased, right? So I think I said this on this conversation before, but I consider art fundamentally to be impossible because you're dealing with the deepest realm of communication, whether you just call it self-expression and self-focus, especially then. I mean, it is impossible to understand a person, fully, right? And so at that level, there's immediately a gap that exists between what you are trying to communicate and the person receiving it. Now, so today, all the um, realities that are created by the stories that we tell are amplified by the machine to, you know, um, create that divide further.
Mm.
It's not working to create a closer communication. It's creating this knee-jerk, kind of response to usually the negative part of what we say, or the most divisive and polarized. So what does that say? Well, first of all, it says that we are prone to be manipulated by even our own spinning the story. So artist's job actually is to create an antidote to that by telling stories in such an authentic way that kind of fuses or brings together this schism and divided elements, and that is something that human beings are very good at, because we are communal beings, and we are meant to have this wisdom, especially through families and tribes. Over the years, we develop this language nurture each other, to protect each other, to so actually historically we are capable of doing this. But because communication is difficult, we shouldn't start with saying, well, I can do that to, correct the polarized, fragmented stories. But we should assume that we can't do it, right? Certainly we can't do it alone. And if we do it alone, the machine's going to only further that divide. So what's our response? Well, our response clearly in these conversations is that we need to belong to each other, that we need to have care for each other's expressions and each other, and try to bridge the gap, right, between certainly the distance that is atomized by digital technology, but also what happens externally to literally create this war against belonging, because it's set up to separate us intentionally. So it doesn't matter, what kind of political spectrum you're on. It doesn't matter. This is universally true, right? So once we realize that, oh, I cannot do that on my own. In fact, if I try to do that on my own, I'll make it worse. Then there's a universal reality that connects all of us. And it's just astonishing to me that it's right in front of us, that we don't even have to go too far in our conversations before we get to a point we say, oh, so we need each other to create an authentic line, because I need to check with you if what I'm seeing is correct or not. What I'm hearing, what I'm reading, am I reading this in a biased way? Only you can tell me that, right? And if we disagree, that's a good thing. Right? That's no longer like who's right and who's wrong, but it's like, okay, so what is the most authentic, truthful thing here?
Yeah.
I need to check myself. You need to check yourself. We can all do that, but collectively, if we're able to do that, then we have an authentic story that actually transcends time and our age, certainly, and all the polarization that we are experiencing. And so art, right, fundamentally becomes that antidote to this fragmented reality. And we discover through art that, it's actually the other way. It's actually kenosis. It's actually giving away yourself that allows this communication to happen, by realizing that, your self-expression is maybe causing more harm than good, right? And if you can diffusively give away ourselves, somehow the seeds will land in the places where they need to land and they need to take root.
And recognizing that disagreement isn't attack.
Right. And there's a common bond of, and maybe we need to learn to disagree in a way that highlights or affirms the impossibility of communication. So humility is one, right? And curiosity is another. We need to constantly say, well, I might be wrong. So not only correct me, but help me to articulate what you're seeing, right?
Yes.
Can I be, can I do that better than even you can? That kind of thing. And we need to learn that we need to be doing this in schools. We need to,
yes,
very early on, we need to just ingrain. And, what was amazing about the Olympics is a lot of the athletes are doing this just because they're disciplined people, and of course there are egos, fighting and rivalries, and those are actually, really exciting thing to watch. But at the end of the day, like swimmers, right? That these people who compete against, and you know something about this, people who compete against each other all the time, right? They could hate each other, but some choose to support each other, and they celebrate each other. And that's like amazing to see, right? In the highest level of competition that's happening. So why can't that happen in politics? Why can't that happen in academia? Why cannot, those are the, I think, things that, culture can tell us and teach
Yes,
us.
yes. And with all of that in mind, will you tell me about your new paintings? I'm like, we're talking and I'm like, it's so fresh in the studio right
Oh
now.
yeah, and so these are new,
Yes.
and I think this one, I don't know if you've seen this green one before, but um, I've been kind of experimenting with same materials, but asking different questions. And this one, silver one, is particularly simple. It's in the days when you can digitize everything, right? So you assume if you digitize something, take a photo of it, it's permanent. And you're imposing that permanency of digital media onto the surface, right? So what happens is if you assume the other way, like if you assume that the surface is constantly changing, a silver will tarnish over time. And so this painting, even though it's done, is not done. 50 years later, it'll still be changing. So in a sense, if every time I take a digital photo of this, it's a different image, right? So I've been wanting to create more images like that. So this Azurite piece is very much about that, so many layers and so many washes that 5 years from now, even like 5 months from now, it'll be a different painting.
Yes.
And the way I found out that this can actually be exciting and interesting is when I donated these liturgical pieces for my church, right? Because I get to see it every week, right? And using the materials that I use here, I was like, I'm watching it, and every season I rotate them. So there are 4 sets and I rotate them. And every time I'm like, wow, this side has settled this way, and that side is, going this way. And I'm like fascinated that, because they were designed to be um, useful paintings that is not designed to stand out in a sense, but they have very subtle movements within them that they are continuing to reveal itself after 4 or 5 years later. And so I thought, well, why don't I paint in a way that actually does that even more so, accentuate that. So that I painted these over the summer. It's already changed. My assistant was like amazed, and he's not a visual artist, but he was like, "Is this the same painting?" And I said, "Yeah." You know. So it's like if you see these as a photograph, a digitized photo, um, that's already passed.
Yeah. I just had this. Do you rotate your paintings when they're in storage?
They do rotate, and now I am kind of intentional in how I place them, even in storage, and how I wrap them, because
Yeah.
I want them to kind of continue to change.
Yeah.
So we give it a little air in between, like box them rather than
Yes.
wrap them. And sometimes we'll put it out in our estuary gallery because I want the sun to hit the surface now, rather than like trying to preserve it. And it's already had this really substantial shift in how I view my own work, and it's been really life-giving to me, because we think about art as commodity, right? Transactional thing. And many times if you show in a gallery, it gets worse, right? It becomes this object to be traded. But fundamentally, the art is not that. It's something that reflects the world. It captures my soul. It's a portal into another world, hopefully. And so the transmutation that happens in a single work can actually help us understand ourselves, and it can be an antidote actually to the divisive black and white, polarized world, where we label each other, because that's a fixated, way of delimiting each other, right? So we label somebody and that's it. There's no possibility of change. And so art fundamentally is a way that our senses can say, oh, things can change,
Yeah. So much possibility.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And even
absolutely.
as we've been talking, there was an earthquake here.
I
And that
noticed that. That was not you shaking the camera.
oh no, no, no. That was a full-on earthquake.
Oh
Um,
my.
and it's the earth changing.
Yes, shifting.
It's
Yeah,
it's that reminder that
right.
there's always movement happening.
Yeah, yeah. And that's certainly, something to be concerned about. I spend a lot of time in Japan where there's a lot of earthquakes, but these materials come from a land, right? Where land is literally impermanent. And so what is permanence, right? And Japanese have, built buildings in a way that will be easier to collapse in a certain controlled way, but it's also easier to rebuild. Such wisdom in that. And these materials are pulverized and they're layered. So that destructive process is part of the beauty. Yeah.
Yeah. So we live in the midst of all of it.
We do. And we capture it on digital media and we get to share that.
There you
Somehow.
go. So good. Thank you, Mako.
You're welcome. So good to talk to you, and I'll talk to you again next month.
Okay, take care.
Okay, bye bye.